microphones are in one place and we're good to go. Hello, everybody. As stated before, I'm on a bit of I'm in a process of building up the momentum of sharing some of the thoughts, discoveries, ideas, insights, crazy ramblings that I've come across over the last few years. And, whilst we're in this continual transitioning phase, I wanted to share some of my thoughts with anybody that's willing to listen and hopefully help to inspire some new conversations that I haven't heard taken place, and or I've not yet been invited to these conversations. So, all rambling aside, let's jump into the topic: AI, the soul trap, and the IoE, or the Internet of Everything. Now, AI is a very contentious subject and has been for since it's been out. Um, and I think it is justifiably so. I am somebody that has adopted and integrated and uses AI. I don't think it's something to be shunned. It's in many ways, it's like when cars came out, people were probably wanting to not use cars because they believed that the only way to travel at that time was using horses. Um, but some of the differences with AI that need to be addressed is looking at the people that are bringing it out, some of their occult connections, some of the things they've been caught on camera talking about using AI for, and also too like the spiritual link of AI. Now we're considering that this is an intelligence that we've created, but when you listen to some of the quantum computing experts, some of the CEOs in Silicon Valley, these guys are talking as if they're fucking summoning it from another dimension. So like there's a bit of a contrast there in believing that we're creating a brand new source of sentient life, or if we're tapping into it by using quantum computers to access different dimensions. And for anybody that hasn't come across that weird thought, there's I might even be able to bring up the actual video. It was Geordie Rose, who is the CEO of D-Wave, which interestingly enough, the logo spells demon. He said this in a conversation maybe 10 plus years ago, that I will have a bit of a look through and dig out as part of this conversation. Now, whether or not that's just one random person rambling about AI, quantum computing, summoning demons, this is something of a topic that a lot of people are talking about and touching on. And as with anything, I find a lot of the conversations, for the most part, at least the conversations that become popular, are very superficial. Like a lot of people don't know what the fuck they're talking about, but they start rambling on about AI is this, is that, it's that. A lot of times I think a lot of the conversation is coming from people that are, have very superficial understanding of the topic. And what I want to do is I want to touch on it from various standpoints, but looking at what's actually happening in terms of it being rolled out, but then also look at some other very, very, very well researched, very educated people and very enlightened people, if you want to use that word, that are talking on the subject. So the first thing I want to talk about or touch on is anytime we're talking about these types of subjects, one of my mentors, somebody that I learned quite a lot from, Seven Boma, he always prefaces certain talks with this disclaimer that this is an adept conversation. Now, if you're somebody who's still relatively new on your enlightenment process or awakening, and you still subscribe to these ideas that you just got to, so long as you're the only one that's focusing on something positive, that nothing negative will happen, this isn't a conversation for you. This is a conversation from understanding that you're not the only person here, even though in some ways you are. It's a bit of a paradox, but if you realize that you're not the only source of consciousness that's here right now observing reality, there's billions of other others of us, or maybe there's millions. Who knows? Everyone's saying there's a lot of NPCs, but essentially, just because I'm bringing something up and it may seem negative, the idea that you can just ignore it and it's going to disappear is stupid, because other people are not only spending their time and effort focusing on manifesting these particular things, they're spending trillions of dollars in doing so. And they have been doing this for decades, or at least for years. And so I want to come at it from an adult standpoint, saying that everything that I'm going to share with you is about talking about what is being currently developed. And, hopefully I'm doing this for the sake of getting more people to understand the topic, and at least see it from the same standpoint that I do. Whether or not that means that, I say that in saying that I don't understand the full thing, and there's things that I'm yet to learn about this topic, but, hopefully I can share some things to give you a bit of an update. So AI in this context of the Internet of Everything is where I mainly want to focus on to begin with. Now, whether or not you realize this or not, a lot of us do, but to the extent of which I don't know how much you're aware of, but essentially the world around us is being created to connect to a digital grid. And it's not, and we need to think about this not just from an externalized standpoint. The technology being developed is quite literally connecting to our biofield or our aura, right? So this is now getting to the point where we're talking about technology that's going to interface with your consciousness. Now, if anybody's had the experience of thinking something and then it shows up on their phone, this is, before we could say, oh, when you said something, then you would see it pop up on your phone. Now it's gone to a point where you think something, it can get onto the phone. It's gone to the point that you can have a dream, and that dream might not have come from your own consciousness. It could actually have been something that was projected onto you via technology. Now, this is something that MIT published, I want to say maybe 8 years ago. Now, I used to reference this quite a lot. MIT dream projection. Now, I realize I'm not sharing my screen. I'm just having a bit of a look to see the date and the public when this was published. And it was over 5 years ago, right? So what are we talking about here? We're talking about that this complete system and infrastructure that's being built is we're integrated into it. If anything, we're the ones that are being used to build this thing out, right? Now, does that seem a bit alarming? Yes. Now, do I think that if this is happening, that there isn't any solutions? No. Do I know what the solutions are just yet? No. But hopefully by sharing this, other people can start to think on this particular topic, and we can come up with solutions together. Now, this idea of tapping into your biofield is being presented in different ways. Firstly, nothing is all good or all bad, because there are quote unquote good applications for this. And some of these include some of the medical applications, which will be able to literally observe your body from a cellular level using AI. And when things are out of balance, or if there's certain things happening within your body that is identified as being problematic, then signals can be sent to your bodies that will then work with the nanotechnology that's already within all of our bodies to cause the body to do something. So one of the ways that this is talked about is, by attacking and developing vaccines for cancer. When they said that, and when Trump said that, and it became quote unquote like this funny joke that people thought was stupid, what he was actually referring to was that the technology that's currently that has been developed, right? It has been developed, literally will use nanotechnology within your body, and the 6G and 7G systems that are being developed and are being rolled out. These things are going to communicate in real time. Your body is going to communicate via the nanotechnology and other different monitoring systems that are in place to talk to the 6G, to connect with the 6G technology to communicate with AI that can monitor and then in real time send signals to your body via the nanotechnology to create certain things, whether it's you need to create these antibodies or you need to attack this particular pathogen, whatever it may be. That is what they're looking to do. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to share my screen at the moment and try to show how this is being mentioned. And, I had quite a few different Facebook posts that I put up about this that have been kind of scrubbed, or I can't find a lot of them. The only 3 that are showing up when I use this particular keyword show. The first one is the Internet of Bio Nano Things, which has already been discussed. And these are already being taught in universities around the world of how there's going to be a bio-cyber interface and devices that are going to be able to do the things that we've just talked about or I've just mentioned, right? So it's going to be able to applications in healthcare, environmental monitoring, and in other areas. Obviously, security is going to be a big one of those. Now, firstly, I want to reference probably the biggest, the person to listen to on this particular topic. Her name is Sabrina Wallace. She is amazing. She has been speaking about this ever since the whole COVID pandemic kind of kicked off. While everybody was focusing on the bullshit that they were pushing with COVID, she was talking about what this is actually leading towards, which is what she's talking about here, graphene healthcare, right? Which is why the vaccines were pushed to get people to, accept the nanotechnology into their body. But now it's gone past it being delivered via only through vaccines. They're putting it in the foods, they're putting it in the water, they're putting it in the air. So everyone's accessing or have some nanotechnology in them, whether they like it or not. And this will be Internet of Nano Things and applications. And this is more information that's linking to how long this stuff has been planned for. Now, this is 2024. This is 4 years ago. But this is talking about how in depth they've developed these nano machines and how these things are going to be working. Hopefully you can see my screen. I'm pretty sure I press share screen. But one of the images that is showing up here is this particular report, and it's got the applications of the Internet of Nano Things, or the Internet of Everything, or the Internet of Things. All of these titles are all one and the same. But as you can see here, you've got these different applications: healthcare, the food industry, agriculture, energy, military, environmental monitoring, manufacturing, transport, smart cities. So all of these things are being linked with being able to interface directly with you via your nanotechnology inside your body, right? Now you think, oh, that's crazy. No way that that's happening. They've been fucking publishing reports about this for years now. You know what I mean? Like, this has been done, right? That report was 2 years ago, and they've been, DARPA has been pushing smart dust down our throats for 30 years now. So, or spraying it in the airs for 30 years. So you think that any of this stuff is new? No. Internet of Everything. Let me see if something else comes up for this. Same 3. So when it comes to understanding what the play is, this wraps a lot of the Agenda 2030 is all wrapped up in the same kind of plan. The digital ID, the smart city initiative, all of these things are creating the infrastructure that all connect with your own biology field via the nanotechnology to be able to have a continuously running monitoring system that's constantly running, right? Now, whether there's clearly going to be some great applications of this technology. However, the people who are developing the technology are also some of the people involved with Jeffrey Epstein and the island that dude was on, and don't seem to be having an issue with some of the things that him and his friends were doing. And that's not just to say Epstein, but it's like We're talking about organizations that are developing these various, these systems that once they're launched, we're talking about Skynet in some ways, right? Like realistically, we're talking about something that can read your brain, read your mind through the brain waves that you are emitting to understand what you're thinking. Now, that's some of the reports that I was looking at that was going into the extent of how developed this technology is. They already can project ideas and movies and images into your brain through your dreams. So at night you can literally be advertised to this. I was reading this and listening to this from the perspective of the commercial applications. They can do this commercially through to you, right? Fact. But then what other extents does this have, right? And where did we agree to this? First and foremost, bringing it all the way back to the human rights component of this. When did we initially agree to become part machine and part of this system? Right now, that's a huge question in itself, and obviously I didn't, and I still don't agree or consent to any of these things. And not that I'm anti this technology, I'm anti the people that are creating it, and the fact that if you're trying to develop it in such a fucking manipulative and covert way, clearly shows that there's something that we should be considering here. But again, a lot of people aren't aware of how far along these particular technologies are. Now, let me see if I can bring up some more articles on this particular topic, just to really showcase how far along this is. Now, this is one of the people that I listen to outside of Sabrina Wallace on Facebook. Jay Wilson, Bird Turd. He has plenty of different posts that are referencing Google. So Google already is listing, like, these aren't conspiracy theories. Like, you can go on Google. That's pretty interesting. I had a magpie flash in front of my room, literally right next to me. Okay. So we had Google publishing and talking about these things. And we've got different syllabuses that are talking about these things as well. When you're looking at Cambridge University and some of the other prestigious universities that are already showing in the curriculums that they're teaching about these things. So, sorry, that kind of threw me a little bit. I literally had a magpie that came up and was about less than a meter away from me squawking. So, talk about a sign. That was a fucking sign right there. Whether or not I should be talking about this, I don't know. But regardless, it's there, right? So whether or not I talk about it, it's still fucking there, right? And that's the problem, because even if I am not talking about this, does that stop it from being there? No. Right? So we've got to understand that something is there that we don't probably want to be there, but it's still being rolled out. So again, I'm going to continue on with some of the other things that I've seen that's linked to this. And maybe it's a good time to veto into, or to kind of connect to the next person I wanted to talk about on this particular subject, as to why these particular technologies are not the best ones or the most favorable for us. And here, who I want to reference is somebody by the name of Dan Winter. Dan Winter has been an amazing person or reference for anybody that's looking to evolve their consciousness. He was the person that coined the term heart wave coherence. And he has an amazing YouTube channel that you should check out. He teaches the science behind consciousness and bliss. And his main overarching teaching is that in order for you to tap into your eternal self, you need to develop your aura. And to develop your aura, you need to be able to consciously align and attune your body to be able to do so. So there's a process to it. Even though we all have spirit and we all have a soul. We need to attune ourselves to be able to activate that soul. And one of the things that he is warning people is that the AI and this 5G and 6G and 7G technology, one of the side effects of these technologies that aren't being discussed enough is the fact that it is eroding your electromagnetic field. All of these things, especially what I just mentioned with the Internet of Everything, they're quite literally tapping into your biofield in order for them to be able to use these technologies. And so all of these technologies are eroding this your aura and essentially are destroying your soul. That's how he says it, and that's what he is warning people about, especially young children who are being born and then completely plugged into a system that they have all of these towers around them. They're constantly being, interacting with technology. All of these things are breaking the link to their soul because they're disconnecting from the electromagnetic smog is disconnecting them from their aura. And when I heard him say that, it actually made me think about a a movie that was recently quite a recent movie about a jinn. Um, what was the name of it? Idris Elba was the person who played in it. And in this movie, 3,000 Years of Longing, he is a jinn that gets, you know, an archaeologist ends up finding him, and there's a story between the two of them. They have like this relationship, but part of the towards the end of the movie, she goes back to her home, and I believe it's in the US or maybe it was the UK, and he couldn't live there with her for a prolonged period of time because of all of the electromagnetic smog. This was a very small component of the movie. It wasn't something that they highlighted. But towards the end of it, when all of their adventure kind of subsided, and you'd think that they're going to end up together. He can't stay there for prolonged periods of time because the environment isn't conducive to him as an entity, as a spirit. And that's made me link and think of what Dan Winter has been talking about with the need to understand that 5G technologies plus and all of the other AI based technology that's interacting with the biofield is eroding that. So this is where I think we need to, I guess this is where this kind of conversation becomes a little bit more, I guess, practical in that sense. If that is the case and we all have different things, a couple of things what I can do right now is at least share some of the tools that I found can address this, because a lot of people still hear these things and think, oh, well, I've got orgone, I've got this, I've got that. All of those things are excellent, but orgone was developed in the 80s or 60s, right, by Wilhelm Reich. We're talking about something that technology that was only developed a couple of years ago, or at least publicly. So I don't. A lot of us maybe have a false sense of security with some of the tools that we have in place, and I think so. So it's going to be worthwhile me sharing some other additional tools that I've come across that I think could be particularly useful. One of those is this particular bad boy. So this is a personalized PEMF device. Now I've got a large PEMF mat that cost me a couple $1,000s to buy. A lot of people I've seen have their own PEMF pendants. Why I like this particular model is, one, is quite cheap, and I'll show you where you can buy it. And the other reason why I like it is because the person that created it, Brett, and he's got a TikTok channel and an Instagram channel, Museum of Tyrone. He's a very, very intelligent person that talks about a lot of these, spiritual issues that are happening. But he has a background in computer sciences, and he's a very smart dude that's talking about subjects that usually is seen as more woo-woo topics. So I really like some of the things that he's done, and the fact that he's building his own products to address some of the issues that he's talking about. And in his on his TikTok channel, he actually shows, because a lot of people are familiar with EMF stickers, right? Now, a lot of those work, but they don't work in the way that are actually beneficial. And what I mean by that is, and I learned this through him, is EMF stickers do block the signal coming and penetrating through the devices from whatever angle it's on, but they generally rebound the EMF signal in the opposite direction, which can make it even more concentrated. Whereas this particular device called the Halo Pulsar, what it does is it actually boosts your own magnetic frequency or signal and nullifies any additional frequencies, or nullifies the frequencies that are trying to impede with them. And he shows this through testing the device itself. And he has a frequency, a device that can pick up on external frequencies. And he shows this. Let me see if I can find it. Because I think this is a very cheap buy that you can keep on yourself all the time, that helps to address the biggest issue, which is the EMF pollution that's happening to us. And here we go. So I'm going to show this video here. Let me see. I'm still learning how to use Restream, so I don't know. Hopefully you can hear what I'm saying. There's one person watching, so hopefully you can hear this. So once again, the website is museumoftaro.com, and it is called the Halo Pulsar. So I bought my first one. I had issues after about 2 months. It stopped the battery for whatever reason. When I went to change the battery for the third time or fourth time, it just stopped working. But shout out to Brett, I think it's Fiona, who's his partner. They replaced that with a brand new unit, and it's no issues at all since. So that's something that can at least help people like with more modern tools to address a lot of the electromagnetic frequency issues that are going on. But then that also leads into the second component, which is the fact that we actually need to do things to develop our own way to connect with our auric field in order for us to be able to overcome the challenges that, to be able to develop to a point where you don't have, you can't be fucked with. Trying to say it in a smart way. Let me just say it how it is. And this is something that Dan Winter talks about at length, that a lot of spiritual practices in theory should be developing or pushing you towards, but depending on how you are as a person and how it is that you take information in, whether you're somebody that needs to have hardcore logic and science and do this, and have like the full on. If you think that spirituality is too woo woo and you need science to explain things to you, then maybe somebody like Dan Winter, who completely speaks in electrical engineering terms. Everything is through the lens of electrical engineering in terms of how to develop your aura to become sustainable. Maybe he's somebody for you. Now, if you're not an electrical engineering person like me, all that shit just after a while starts to, drown out. Maybe Taoism or another form of, Eastern approach perhaps could be something that can help you tap into your own biofield and your own, unique systems, right? Because that's one thing that is has come out as that I guess we're coming to a point of understanding as part of all of this Internet of Everything research and 6G technology. All of these things are essentially now agreeing and admitting that the human beings have always had an aura, and that we've been, and this is what Sabrina says, we've been for 100 years made to believe that we don't have, that the aura wasn't part of our anatomy. We've been made to think that we've only got our five senses and there's this mystical sixth sense, when in reality that the sixth sense is a natural aspect of a human being, of any mammal or any living being, organic living being. And about 100 years ago, the private military industry had a conceited effort to make to make it seem as if any ideas around an aura, a biofield, chi, prana, mana, anything like that was crazy talk, and that was all unscientific. And then they spent the better part of a century of understanding and mastering everything to do with the aura, or as they term it, the biofield, and now have developed technology to the point of being able to interact with human beings' auras. And again, a big part of how they do that is through pumping us full of nanotechnology, right? And the degradation of the chemicals, of the nutrients, all of these things working together in order for them to be able to create a system that is able to interact with the human body by making the human body less supreme, less optimal, right? And so the counteracting of that, and I'm speaking to myself here because I'm not in the best health at the moment, is to improve your well-being. And so maybe this is going to be more of an intervention to myself, from myself, where I'm going to share some of the things that I've collected along the way that I know to be valuable and to be of use, but I haven't fully put to practice. And some of these things I'd like to share because I don't see a lot of other people talking about these particular products used in this way. So nanotechnology, nanobots, detoxing. A lot of people talk about detoxing, right? And there's a million and one ways that you can detox, from shoving things up your bum and letting yourself release, to fasting, to taking all kinds of supplements. Now, while I've tried all of those things, and I've noticed that I've had newer issues as I've gotten older because of, again, more different technologies and chemicals that I'm being exposed to, that my body is now needing to resolve. I think one protocol that I've only recently come across, that was again thanks to the Museum of Tarot, that I think could be really beneficial is, that is way too bright, is using electricity, to an electrical current, to facilitate detoxification. Now, this is piggybacking off of Dr. Bob Beck's work. You might have heard of Dr. Hulda Clark, who has amazing detoxes and flushing protocols, specifically with the liver and gallbladder. She's, the first time I heard of her was through the liver flush, gallbladder flush. But she also created a zapper that was able to destroy a lot of the flukes and intestinal worms that you had using frequencies and electricity. So when she was doing her amazing work, that was also around the same time as another man who I've only recently heard of, whose name was Dr. Bob Beck, who was working for the Navy as an engineer and ended up moving over into the private medical space where he was using electricity, very, very low amounts of electricity, electrical charge, electrical current, with ozonated water, with colloidal silver, and PEMF again. He used those four in combination as part of what he calls the Beck protocol, and that was able to really break down a lot of the viruses within the body. He was one of those guys that was able to cure AIDS, but he couldn't, when he said that he did and proved that he did through all of the medical cases that people that he had worked with, the FDA, I believe it is in America, came against him and, pretty much put him through the ringer because he was one of those men that, was standing up and saying that what the medical industry was saying was bullshit, and that at the time when he developed the Beck device, you could put it together yourself, and he taught people how to make it themselves for less than $20. And he demonstrated through his own healthcare journey that he had reversed a lot of what had been claimed as being permanent issues just using that device and the protocol that he mentioned. And so with that being said, what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the information as to how to get the Beck device for yourself. This one was not very expensive. So the Halo Pulsar was about $220 US. This particular Beck device, I think I bought it for $120 US. And the reason why I'm specifically talking about this is, and I'm just going off vibes here, if we're talking about nanotechnology within the body, then I can only imagine that running a safe electric current through the body is going to be something that would help to destroy any nanotechnology that might be in there, potentially, right? Maybe it does, maybe it doesn't. Hopefully it doesn't supercharge them. That would suck. I'll let you know if I go full AI robot nano man, you'll be able to tell. And so for the time being, let me experiment with it. If you don't want to jump in to the deep end, I'm happy to do so, and I will let you know how it goes. Bear with me while I find the link to the website. That is the device. And these are all handmade from a guy called Bozida he's from Eastern Europe. Really cool guy. All right. So where are we? Mate, look at me fucking multitask today. So the website is Electronic Kit Complete. And here you have the picture of the lovely Bozida. Hopefully I'm saying his name correctly. And he shows what happens to your blood after using it within the 2 hours, right? So pretty crazy that you can see these things pretty quickly. And this is the device kit that you get. So you get the unit with the cords, and then you get 2 electrode nodes that you can then put on your wrist. What I've done is I bought these TENS pads, and you can now put them onto your wrist. You can put them anywhere that you need to, essentially, and then run that electrical current through. I'm not going to lie, I've done some pretty, I've tried to put it in all different places, especially around the where the lymphatic nodes have been concentrated the most. But I'll also be honest and say that I haven't fully, researched and methodically kind of wrapped my head around how long I've been doing it. Like, what's the word? I haven't taken the time to really note what's been going on, what changes, what benefits I've been able to experience. So I will do that, and I will share that, because I think that just intuitively, running an electric current through the body should be a way to be able to address the nanotechnology. And if not the nanotechnology, so many of the other issues that we have. When when you think about what electricity is and the fact that this term of alkalinity and making yourself become alkaline is being able to hold a current. And if the human being is a battery, you know, and things like chi and all of these prana and all of this essence is electricity and is energy running through the body, then being able to use electricity as a source of healing within, in a smart and safe way, I think it intuitively makes sense. I don't need some dorks and with 15 hours of peer-reviewed studies on what happens when you plug this into a rat's fucking ass. I don't care what that, I don't need any of that to be able to say that, hey, I think this can be good within a safe parameters. And I trust certain people that are willing to go against the grain to be able to share tools and resources, especially when they do that with the sense of giving it away for free so people can build it themselves. I think it's worthwhile. So um, rambling done. That could be one other solution to assist with the nanobot issue nanotechnology issue, or just some of the other elements, health elements that we're dealing with. More charge, more electricity, more purification of the blood can always be a good thing, right? So going back to what we were talking about before, looking at how these things are rolling out, the Internet of Everything, the Internet of Bio-nanotechnology, how that connects with the nanotechnology that were found in the COVID vaccines and in all the other vaccines up until this point. Obviously, like, I don't know what we're going to be able to do about that, because we're at a point right now that you've got a large majority of people who don't even know that this is a problem. They don't know that it's a problem. And what it's going to take to not just convince them that it's real, because a lot of people, again, err on the side of thinking that things aren't real, or they don't consider things until it's gotten to a point where it's so blatantly obvious that it has to be dealt with. And usually at that point, things are almost completely rolled out. But for anybody that's willing to listen to this, me kind of thinking out loud, how do we navigate moving forward with this understanding of what's being developed on the sidelines, right? Understanding that billions of dollars are going to Agenda 2030, trillions of dollars are going towards Agenda 2030, and have been for the last 15 years. The smart cities, the digital ID, all of these things will be as a closed loop system that all can connect directly into your aura via these technologies. And now, as somebody who doesn't want these things to completely unfold the way that they're unfolding, I'm sharing it to say that, hey, I think this is something that we should consider, we should prioritize, and we should, collectively come together and see what we can do, whether or not that be putting the intentions out there for these things to be stopped, whether you're somebody that believes in prayer and collective, and that the fact that if we all sit here together and we all focus on a certain thing, not only can we create a causal, we can cause something to happen through shared intention, but also whether or not that means that solutions may come through, because we've got more and more people that are now understanding or aware that this is a potential problem, and somebody who is uniquely qualified or uniquely designed to be able to address this issue may come forth, or might get some inspiration or have a download or whatever you want to say. I think that's how these things work. And so my particular role in a lot of this stuff is to essentially call things out before most other people are aware of them. At least that's what I believe it to be. And I think this is the elephant in the room that no one wants to talk about. We've heard people complain about the digital ID. We've heard people talk about, obviously we all called out COVID for the bullshit that it was. But Sabrina Wallace was the one the whole time saying that, look, all of this stuff is all interconnected to this larger agenda of this Internet of Everything. And, I'm somebody that has been around, a lot of us are familiar with crypto. the IoE, IoT, IOTA, these are all things that have been literally sold as tokens for over a decade now. I believe it's the IOTA coin, right? So these things have been been planning, been uh, in the works for a very, 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 very long time. And so for those of us that are now just catching up to it, having this as something to consider moving forward, I think is going to be important. And in some ways, the beauty of, or at least in some ways, what this is doing is this is closing this loop that many people still have, especially people that are more quote unquote non-conspiratorial. As it's gone to the point that technology is now claiming to be able to interact with a human being's biofield, and even though they're not using terms like aura, the fact that a whole field of medicine is now being built forth from directly connecting to one's aura and biofield, that even though it's not directly acknowledging the fact that we have the sixth sense and some of these other more subtle aspects to ourselves, it has to acknowledge that if it's going to acknowledge how the technology works, which it's already done, right? It's already talked about how it's using the various energetic electromagnetic fields of the human body in order to collect information. And so that's one component of what is going to be an outcome of this technology being rolled out, is that the whole kind of divide between quote unquote spirituality and science has to at some point be removed, because it's like they have to acknowledge, when I say the institutions that are developing this technology have to acknowledge that they had to look into fields or look into things like the human being's aura and look at what the mystics have been teaching in some of the holistic medical paths like the Ayurvedic and the traditional Chinese system. They had to look at these particular systems to understand that there's elements of the human being that traditional Western medicine isn't considering, and these additional aspects of ourselves are what they are using to. These are how they're tapping into us. They're using that as the interface for our aura. So in some way, shape, or form, there's a short quote unquote disclosure there. Now, that also to me says that we then can now double down on the fact that when I say we, I'm talking about me, double down on developing our auras, our biofields, doing more things to protect ourselves and from the different environmental influences. As I mentioned before, the halo pulsar, whether it's different other, EMF blocking tools, there's going to be a good, better, and best in terms of doing something about it is better than doing nothing about it. But then looking at what are some of the solutions and understanding that, while orgone might be a great place to start, it might not be the best place to put to expect to have. Don't expect it to be the A++ solution, right? It's a good starting place, but you need to level up, especially if you're like myself and live in a big city. If you're now closer to nature, obviously, then you might have a bit more wiggle room. But if you're living in a city like myself, like Melbourne, one of the biggest, I think it's the biggest city now, population-wise in Australia, and you have a ton of these 5G, 6G towers that are put up, you do need to now have something that you can keep on yourself all the time, right? As a preventative measure. That also makes, might be worthwhile looking at and investigating Bob Beck and his system, which I also will suggest to start learning from the Museum of Taro's page, because he's got a lot of amazing information about Bob Beck and some of Bob Beck's actual lectures. He has them re-uploaded. We're talking about a guy in the 60s that was, developing these things well ahead of his time. And the Museum of Taro also has a lot of devices you can buy directly from him, from the site. So a good place to start. And hopefully this is something that we can, at least start to explore a little bit enough to talk about more or include in the wider discussions. When people are talking about the digital ID, that is like one small fraction of this full Internet of Everything. Like the digital ID is like the door, is a door, one of many doors. So it's like imagine complaining about a door when there's a fucking house that's built behind it. That all of it is something that you need to be considered like concerned about because it's being built around you. And while we're focusing on one point of it, we're not seeing the other aspects of it being built around us. And as somebody in Melbourne right now, the smart city initiative right now is taking off. There's construction going everywhere. I'm in the largest suburb by population in the country, and there's so much construction happening in and around this particular area. And as it's been stated through the Agenda 2030 and through the Smart City Initiative, the idea is to create the ecosystem that you only need to go 15 minutes in any direction to have everything you need from your medical, from your educational needs, from your shopping needs, whatever it may be. You know, they're wanting to reduce the carbon offset and footprint of people by giving them all of their things, everything close to them or within a very short distance to where they are. Now, again, like with anything, I think that everything comes with good and bad, and there's clearly going to be some good things that come out of these developments. But as I mentioned before, and a lot of people, have the same feeling, it's the people who are in charge of doing all of these things that we're concerned about. And it's the fact that all these things are being done with so much so much of it is being subvertly done and covertly done. That is the concerning part of it. So, with that being said, that's almost another hour done. Appreciate whoever is viewing. I've got one person on YouTube watching. Hello. It's been very interesting to get back into streaming and talking about some of these topics, and I'm doing so. And it's funny. A lot of why I'm doing this is because I'm seeing all these reels pop up on Instagram. Well, I mainly use Instagram, and you see people talking about subjects, but they don't. And I'm not here to shame anyone or to throw shade, but it's like a lot of us are talking about, or we've popularized a fraction of this topic. And so you've got thousands of people that know about, one component of this whole issue. Let me see if I can actually find the exact, my phone's being used here. There was one post that actually, inspired me to talk about this. Let me see if I can find it. So somebody was talking about graphene oxide, and this is what I noticed. We live in an age where everybody wants to be a fucking influencer, right? So people will listen to somebody like Sabrina Wallace, who to me is like the leader of this thought field, and then they will break down the information and present it as if it's their own information, and they will only put a bite-sized amount of info to make sure they get a ton of engagement, but they're not actually talking about the topic. Like, to me, this really frustrates me. And again, whether or not they actually understand what the issue is one component. But the other problem is that you've got people that are now jumping on board and kind of claiming this whole topic as if they're the ones that were the ones that figured it out and were fixing it. And that's what made me want to talk about this. Somebody was talking about graphene oxide and talking about nanotechnology. And yeah, that is obviously an issue. That is a problem. However, there's a whole element around it. That graphene oxide and the nanotechnology is connected to the Internet of Everything, which then leads down the rabbit holes that we've discussed. So that, I think, is enough for today. I appreciate whoever it is that's following along. Sorry, I can't see any chat or anything, so I don't know if you've commented anything. If you haven't, doesn't matter, but I appreciate you. I'm going to continue to do these like simulcasting live streams just whenever something pops up in my head that I feel like I want to talk about. Let's see if we have another weird experience where I literally had a bird fly into my window when I was talking about this topic. But I do think this is the elephant in the room that needs to be covered. The Internet of Everything, how that's connected to the overarching kind of Agenda 2030, how that's linked with digital ID, how it's linked with the vaccines that came out. All of these things are all part of this one infrastructure that, if you want to kind of put a term or label around it, could be likened to this whole Skynet thing. Because what it does is it connects directly into our biofield. It has the ability to project thoughts onto us or images onto us, as well as be able to read our brainwave activity to, and supposedly be able to translate that into thoughts, in language. So they can supposedly read your mind using this technology. And all of these things, again, have pretty cool applications that could really benefit humanity, but at the same time, too, pretty fucking creepy. And if people are able or now developing technology to read our minds and potentially, and this is where Palantir is now another component of this. Now you've got security, policing, spy agencies that are now using this technology. Like, what are we doing here, guys? Like, it's pretty fucking crazy. So I could keep ranting, but I'm going to stop. Appreciate you. Have a lovely day, and